Okay, third try. Today we're mending. And in mending, what we're doing is closing up the threading here. And how we do it with a knit is we're basically reworking the fabric. And with the knit, what we want to do is close up any little loops we have that come loose. We had one down here, so we put 2 little stitches in it, and then we picked up the loop above, pulled it underneath with a little piece of thread around it because we're adding strength to it. Now we are solidified this piece here so that it also isn't going to run, because that's part of our problem, is that this just keeps making a bigger and bigger hole because of the fact that we have different threads that are broken, and that's why it runs down, and it would keep going if we didn't stop it and fix it. So that's what we're doing here. Tilt the camera down a little more so that this is more comfortable and you can see what I'm doing here. Let me get my hand back in there. So now I need to run 2 rows of what we've got here. But I'll continue with the first one I had after stabilizing that. See, I go up, I pick up the next one and bring it back. If you have to, you can go like this, bring it up, hook your loop around it, and then pull it back. If you're a crocheter and you have some of those super tiny crochet hooks, that can also help you do this a little more quickly. Because essentially what we're doing is just re-knitting it together. And you don't want to pull it too tight, but then that's all in practice, because we want it to, you know, look as neat as possible, because that's the advantage of fixing it. And when you start out, don't expect it to be perfect when you first start. But you can see that we're just rebuilding thread right in there. And it pulls it all together and fills it in. And you're going to have to do a couple rows, because in this case, see, I have another broken thread here and here. So I'm going to have to catch those. So this job takes a little time, which is why I'm sitting out here in my living room instead of in my sewing studio. Because, you know, you want someplace comfortable to sit. And that's why in times past, people would do all their mending while they were watching TV or listening to somebody read, radio shows, anything where you can pass the time and not worry about having to, hold something else. So listening type things, listening to music, but being comfortable. Okay, some of these are very fragile, so we might do two together just to give it some strength. Because there's two reasons we're going to get a run like this in a hole, and that's we catch it on something, or that it's something we just love so much that we don't want to get rid of. And the threads get fragile. Threads get fragile over time. It's just what happens. Everything eventually wears out. But when it's something that's your favorite, you want to keep that. Okay, now I'm going to go back down before we close off this circle, because we're going to do that a little differently. So when we go back down, we're doing the same thing, just rebuilding. The threads. Now we don't loop them together when we're doing a woven, and the difference with a woven is it has threads that go sideways and vertically and horizontally. And with that, then we just weave it in and out like you used to do with paper when you were in school. So hopefully I'm keeping it mostly under there so you can see how it pulls itself together as we go back down, scooping it up underneath. The other thing one can do to fix a hole like this is to put a lace on top of it, if one had something that would match, or a patch. A patch we will do later, but a patch is where we add fabric to something. We tend to use that a lot with jeans in actuality. Okay, so I'm back to the bottom, so now I can take it back up, and for this bottom part, we're not going to come down this low again, because we've now pretty much recreated all of that fabric. You could even do this with a different colored thread, which is fun to add a decorative hint to it. See, I'm picking up towards the edge here because I have a few broken threads that need collected. And you might see as you try that some of them break and you just have to go out a little bit further to collect them. There we go. Okay, so now we're back to putting these together, and right here I have a few that need connected too because there's broken threads. And again, we don't want to pull it too tight. There's nothing worse than a too tight mending job because it doesn't look nice. And if we're going to do this, part of our goal is to look nice, because when our clothing looks nice, then we feel better. And you know, it's all about feeling better. It's all about feeling our best no matter what. This is the kind of top I would wear to you know, go out hiking or possibly work in a garden if I had one, which I don't at this point in my life. Or I would have wore this when I was helping my parents take care of their sheep. That came unthreaded, so let's just thread this up real quick. And you don't want too long a string, because the longer your string in this kind of work, it can tangle really easily. So picking up pieces. Oops. And threaded myself again. There we are. There we are. And see, now I'm here at this spot, so now I just head back up, hooking it back in. So mending came about and was used a lot during times when we didn't have a lot of resources to fabric here in the world. It's always also been used when people have less money available. And it's very nice nowadays because we also use mending, or are thinking about using mending as it's rediscovered, because we realize that there's a lot of wastefulness in just throwing something out. When we can just learn to fix it. Now, not everybody has learned to sew these days, but this is a type of sewing that pretty much anybody could pick up. And how good you get at it just depends on how much practice you put into it. Because I could just grab the stitches on each side and sew this together with what's called a whip stitch. I personally like it to look as cool and smooth as possible, and I enjoy the motion of using my hand needle to redo this, to recreate what has been broken here. I find a real symbiotic, soothing relationship to being able to fix it. And especially if it's something you really, really like, then this is an easy way to do it. I have one of my customers who, I think we have one pair of jeans that pretty much is all made of patches on the inside nowadays. Okay, now we're to the next part, because where there's an actual hole, there is a lot of breakage in the threads. Okay, so there's the part that was a run, and we had that pretty well sewed up. Okay, so this part though, we're going to have to sew all the way around with a little stitch. Keep on threading that needle today, so that we can pull it closed neatly. You always want your hand or something inside to hold everything flat. Otherwise it ends up really bunched up, which is what we don't want. Okay? All right. Get my hand back in there after threading that needle. So we take little stitches all around the side because we have so much breakage. And they have to be far enough back that we're not gonna unwind things, and really close together. We have another run on this side, but we'll fix this part first. And it's always better to do it as much as you can with a solid thread, because then you don't have more knots that can come untied or unwound. But again, it's balancing, making sure you don't have too much thread to where it just spends its time getting tangled, because that's just frustrating. And when we're frustrated, we don't tend to do our best work. It's just something you just want to, enjoy, ease into. Okay, now we have it all the way around, and what we do is we gently pull it into a togetherness. All right, because we literally have a hole here, so we use that to pull it all fairly close together. And now we're going to go back and forth, sewing it in, and you want the tails to be on the bottom side. The tails are all those broken edges. And you want to do this fairly loosely, and be sure you're catching it behind your stitching. Behind your stitching means not near the edge as much as behind where you stitched, because where you stitched is what's going to help hold it in place. Okay, and I'm going over the top so that all those little edges go underneath, because again, we want this to be nice and smooth as we can make it. We don't want it to be a bubble. And if you embroider, which some people do, I do not, one of the other cool things is what you can embroider this closed. You could make this into a flower or put a leaf over the top of it. There's some really cool ways people have done that I've seen on YouTube channels too, other YouTube channels. So you could just check that out, or on Pinterest, where they show pictures of that. And if you're an embroiderer, you'd be able to definitely do that. Again, we sewed around the hole before we pulled it in, because we have to be able to close that off. Okay? See? And then we come back. Once we are sure we have it all closed off, all our tails pulled in, and we're going to fix the run on the top end here. Again, making sure that we get all the broken ends tied down. You want to be sure you catch them all and close them off so that they don't just keep running. This one's a lot smaller, so it's a little easier to get done. And I should have just enough thread to where I can tie this off, because how you tie it off is you take 3 to 5 stitches depending on the thickness of your fabric and do them right in the same spot. That way you don't have a knot sitting there. It's just a lot less cumbersome. So see, I'm at the end here, and I want to just take couple stitches right on top of each other, which will help flatten out that end. See? And then we pull it to the back. There. That is how we do it. Then you clip that off so it's not annoying. Our mended piece. It's a little bubble because we had a hole in it, but it's pretty smooth. And it's not glaring. So you can still put on your comfy thing, whatever it is, in this case shirt, and enjoy whatever time you have wearing it. Awesomeness.